All right, let's do it. We are going to talk to Steve, who is calling in from Texas. Steve, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hello, Dan and Mike, or Jmike, excuse me. How are you doing?
That's right. Doing good. I'm glad you remembered to respect the J.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's okay. You can call me Mike. No worries.
All right. Well, I have been a frequent commenter on the Fox comment boards with the religious articles, and in doing that, I did a lot of research to argue with these theists. And everything I found is just readily available information on the internet, and the pieces of the puzzle just weren't put together right. And when I started looking at it, it just made a lot more sense if you looked at the whole Jesus story from a Roman perspective, because they were the ones in charge. They were the ones writing the history.
When you say writing the history, what do you mean?
I'm sorry?
When you say writing, when the Romans were the real ones writing the history in relation to Christianity, what do you mean by that?
When the Roman army would go in and conquer an area, they would then destroy the culture and replace it with a Roman-friendly culture. They did this with the Celts and the Druids up in Britannia. And so when they came down and worked with Judea, there's no reason to believe they didn't do the same thing. And the operation that worked with that was a Roman imperial cult.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that term?
I'm familiar with so basically the idea is there's kind of these state cults, these state mystery cults that were around at the time.
But just a religion.
Yeah. It's a little more complicated.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. A system of beliefs.
The State Department, they acted like the State Department, the CIA, the whole thing rolled into one underneath the Army. So,
well, from what I'm hearing, though, Steve, it seems that you're saying, at least that's what I get from the call script here too, is that Jesus himself was a creation of one of these imperial cults.
No, totally. And what I think, the thing I believe is that he was a historic figure, a crucified criminal or seditionist, and then Paul comes in and takes over, and he was operating for the Romans.
Oh, so Paul is a double agent. He's not really a Christian.
This is not my creation. This is Robert Eisenman, an archaeologist and biblical scholar. You may be familiar with his work.
I don't think I've heard of this one. Have you heard of this, Jmike?
Well, at first when I was going on, I was assuming it was gonna be like the at will type of thing. Like, was it Caesar's Messiah?
Too.
Yeah. Okay. So
real
fast, because that's where my skeptometer kind of goes off, because like there's a lot of like mythicists and even biblical scholars that are would be in that camp that just completely reject that writing as being based in conjecture and not in fact.
Oh, you're talking about Roberts?
I'm talking about Joseph Atwill. If that's where you're getting it.
Okay, well, as far as Atwell, that's actually the first thing that when I started asking Google questions, saying, is there a Roman influence with Jesus? The first thing I ran into was Caesar's Messiah. And
sure. So let me just real fast. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just got to ask you: Are you aware that even Bob Price and Richard Carrier reject those
right?
Those conjecture, just saying that, because you said fit the puzzle pieces together, and one of the quotes specifically is Carrier mentions is that he's just citing things like coincidences and references and mistranslations and kind of fitting that. And so, if I have that correctly, and so I'm just curious if you're aware of that, because it's not like it's pretty much regarded as just conjecture by even people that are mythicists.
Right, but what I saw with Atwell is that he had some good points in there, but then it fails because he can't answer Paul, the question of how did Paul's writings perceive this, and that's what Robert Eisenman's theory fills in the blank. That Paul.
So everything Paul wrote in his career was actually because he was being paid by the state to influence Christianity? Is that kind of the working theory?
To turn it from a messianic, because the original Jesus, the real Jesus, would have had more of a messianic message and leading the revolt.
So let's talk about this plan. So Paul, this guy who, by his own account, was a persecutor of Christians,
and a Roman,
right?
And a Roman citizen.
And a Roman citizen. Okay, right. So already an outsider in this. His own story is that he had a change of heart and began influencing the church. But if you were to come up with this conspiracy, Steve, and you were to say, I want to influence this church in this theology so we can do things to him, why would you pick the guy that literally killed Christians? That doesn't make sense, right? Because like even Paul in his writings talks about his disagreements with Peter, right? And other figures of the church. So wouldn't you want to pick the guy like Peter? Wouldn't you want to pick somebody that's like already in on it? I don't know. That doesn't say, just from a conceptual level, that's hard for me to wrap my head around.
It does. Wait. You need to consider that he's a Roman citizen. So if I'm an imperial cult priest and I come to a Roman citizen tax collector and say, I need you to do this, he's going to do it. So he had his episode on the road in front of his own men. And then he claimed to be a Christian.
Yeah, that's a long con, I got to say, because he would have had to do that for the rest of his life.
Then,
right.
He did it for 30 years before they killed him.
Yeah, so he's been living in Christian community this whole time, and he's getting secret paychecks from the Roman government.
He got a lot of money. He was operating with a lot of money.
How do you know that?
Yeah, I was going to say, how is this? Because it sounds like you're just fitting it and saying this seems to be the most likely, which is some like
it is. I'm going off probability. Yes, I'm building on probability.
But okay, but hold on, I have a problem there because we'll use induction for probability, but when you're looking at you can't say how probable it is looking at what's most likely in the past if you're just excluding data or choosing specific data that fits, right? That's going to be what's called post hoc rationalizing.
Yeah.
Well, here's where you're going to get beyond me because I'm just an average guy, and that's what's. That's why I'm calling. I want you to shoot big holes in this so I can.
Well, sure. Yeah. Let me explain that last part then with just with better language. So if I was to I'm trying to think, if I was to come up across the woods and I see some tracks or something like that, right? You could say say it's big, a Bigfoot, right? And we could say, well, it's, someone could suggest that it's Bigfoot. Someone could suggest it's some large animal. Someone could suggest that it's some guy going around creating this for, hoax for Bigfoot. But when we look at the data, we come across that our implicit and empirical basis, if it doesn't fit all that, the answer is just we don't know, right? We're not going to be able to make a decision on knowing. But if it's something you think it was some, it's not like you're making this extraordinary claim real fast. It's not like you're making this extraordinary claim it's aliens or something. So I don't want to paint you there. It's not like you're out of this realm of it being reasonable, but it seems to be on the same par as any other theory I could cook up using the same data and then just using a different conclusion at the end. You can just underdetermine it really quickly by just, I'm going to use the same data and come up with another conclusion. And that's what post hoc rationalizing is. It's just going to be taking that data and assuming some conclusion, all fitting the data. I mean, you can do that all the time. And you can do that even with scientific theories. You could take all the data and then just go, well, I actually think the explanation would be this. But what separates it in that case is some a new future prediction, right?
Yep.
That provides that. But when you're looking at the past, I don't really know how you're going to have a successful time at saying this is the most likely. I mean, that's precisely what biblical scholars are doing, and they disagree with your assessment.
Well, because there's a record of what the Romans did in warfare.
But we don't have a record of the Romans paying off Paul or doing anything that's been described.
No. There's no pay stubs.
Right, so there's no evidence of that. There's evidence of other things happening, but not of the claim that you're trying to make. So it doesn't really matter at the end, right?
Yeah, it's really convenient that it's like they're secretive and things like the thing that you're appealing to is something that couldn't be data, right? It's secret. It's like you're excluding this thing from being known. And then that's like, to me, that's damaging to the argument. Like, sure, that could be the case, but it's like to assess that, it's like it's entirely unfalsifiable if you're just saying that the records don't even exist, right?
And let me be clear here too, Steve, because I'm going to criticize myself here in the argument that I made earlier, because what I was doing was coming up with other probable scenarios with like or the unrealisticness of a scenario. Okay, conspiracies have happened historically, right? Like, I'm not going to be a guy that says, oh, well, it's a conspiracy theory, it's not real. Like, you can look at historical evidence for that, but the difference is we can look at why we know that certain conspiracies did happen, and it's because of that evidence, because of the records that Jmike is talking about, at least for even more modern ones, and even for ancient ones, there's some ideas of and speculation. But as far as what evidence do we have for this? Well, the Romans had a practice of instituting religions in places. Okay, so there's precedent. But besides that, do we have any evidence of that this specifically? Because what that describes, right, is just a possibility. And a possibility is not necessarily an explanation. It's a possible explanation, but it doesn't mean it's the explanation, because we can come up with lots of other possibilities, including the one that Paul was just a dude that was convinced of Christianity, right?
Convinced? Well, his story was he had visions.
Yeah, so he was convinced of the truth of Christianity.
Well, no, it sounds like more he had actual visions and knew what Jesus said to him, and that doesn't seem near as possible.
Well, no, I'm not saying that Paul actually had visions of Jesus. Okay, I'm being very specific in my language here, Steve. What I'm saying is he was convinced of Christianity. That's it. I'm not speaking to the truth value of Christianity or even the truth value of his visions. All I'm saying is he was convinced of the truth of Christianity. I think that much is clear, right?
Yeah, I have these like two weird things. One I'm not going to take credit for, but I think it's actually a decent point. Just thinking about it now. But the first thing, what I said earlier, is like you're saying something's more likely absent the data required for us to say it's more likely, especially if it's like some secret payoff, right?
Yeah.
So it's absent the data, so that doesn't work.
Well,
we can cross that out. But then secondly, if they are to hire Paul to invent a fake Jesus, why not just invent a fake Paul to save the money that's in there, right? It's like, it seems just like you could make this
influence the culture at the time.
Sure. So
he was in with the people, influencing the direction of a movement.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying that it's impossible. We're just saying that there isn't enough to really look at least in my opinion, that this would be considered probable in any way, right? Because like, again, like scholars who have read this stuff their entire lives, way more about this than I have heard this before and have looked at this and said, yes, this isn't likely. And so until that changes, I don't think I'm going to say that it's likely either.
Well, that's why I'm just trying to get to present this to someone to get them to tell me where I've got a fatal flaw so I can move on. That was my whole purpose.
The fatal flaw is appealing to it being most likely.
Yeah.
And the thing that's like part of your theory is going to be something that there's no data for. It's just conjecture. You're saying that it's most likely, right, that he was paid, but you don't have records, so like you can't really say that it's most likely. Sure, like Dan said, it could be possible, but under what basis? It just goes back to like the post hoc thing that I was saying earlier. You just look at the data and then come up with a conclusion that fits the data after the fact, and you can do that with anything. Like I can literally do that. I could say that it rained outside, or I could go outside, right, and it's all wet, and I go, it rained outside, and someone could go, I think the little neighbor kid ran around the entire neighborhood with a super soaker and just sprayed the entire neighborhood down, right? Like, to me, it's like, it just seemed...
Previously, that might be a good explanation.
Sure, but if like the data's not even there to appeal to, then I don't know why I would appeal to that data, right? Like, I would appeal to what's probably more consistent with the actual data itself.
Again, Steve, like precedent is important, and you've established, and for the sake of argument, we're going to agree with you and say, yeah, there may be a precedent for this, but it's again, it's one explanation of many, and we have to look at the likelihood of all these explanations. And how do we determine that? Well, we look at all the other possibilities
the one
here.
I'm pursuing now.
What?
This is just the one I see likely I'm pursuing.
What is wrong with the explanation that Paul was just convinced that Christianity was true? I mean, like, why is that so hard to believe in of itself?
Because his story is not just he's convinced; it's that he had an experience, a divine experience.
Why is that different from being convinced? I'm not like, I don't know what the holdup is there. What's up with that?
Convinced, someone talks me into it. Having a divine being come into your head and give you messages is slightly different.
Okay, yeah, but we also agree that like that didn't happen, right? Like, I'm assuming you're not a Christian, I think, right?
No,
so like,
no.
Yeah,
I'm saying
so, like,
Paul had a screwy story.
yeah, I mean, that's just, people just have screwy stories. I mean, like, I don't know. that seems way more likely to me than there's a conspiracy from the Roman government to influence a religion of a geopolitical on a geopolitical mission. I mean, I don't know. Like, people just lie about shit. Like, it just happens, right? Like,
well, I think you had a reason to do it.
You know, I don't know what Paul's reasons were. Maybe he had, maybe he really did have some sort of illness that affected him. Maybe he was a bit of a megalomaniac and he wanted the attention. I don't know, but those are also just speculations that I have to make because I don't have enough evidence to say one way or another. And like, this is again another possible explanation, Steve, that I got to put up on the maybe board and not most likely board because I don't think there's enough there. But Steve, we got to talk to some other people. Yeah, I've
maybe board.
And you know, that's where I'll hang my hat. But you know, I would say if you're looking for somebody to present this to, I'm flattered that you chose us. But like, you know, see what Bart Ehrman or somebody has to say. Email those guys. I'm sure they could give you an even better explanation as to why this may not be the best path to pursue. But anyway, I appreciate you calling in, Steve. Thanks so much for the topic of conversation. I'll be honest, I haven't heard that one before. I'm glad that you knew a little bit about that, Jmike, because that was new information to me.
It's been a while. I don't really recall the Caesar's Messiah as much. Someone else has called in about it before, but yeah, it just sounded like that's what it was going. But I guess it was like a
variation,
a little mashup of
a little mashup.
Yeah, of conspiracies. But yeah, I don't find like a contradiction in the view. So it's like not like we just. But when I say we cross it off, it's just I can't take it's more likely seriously if the data's absent, you know.
And I don't want to make sure that I'm on the same boat with you there too. We are not saying absolutely no. It's not. Yeah. That's not what happened. What we are saying is I'm not convinced of that for you know reasons we've presented. Right? Consent. We've appealed to authority. We've appealed to lots of other things here. So I think we've made our case pretty clear. Hopefully. That came out the way we wanted it to.